ज्ञानदां वरदां वन्देऽहं शारदां विशारदां ज्ञानदां वरदां वन्देऽहं शारदां विशारदां ज्ञानदां वरदां वन्देऽहं शारदां शुद्ध सत्व स्वरूपिणीं स्वच्छ हृदय निवासिनीं शुद्ध सत्व स्वरूपिणीं स्वच्छ हृदय निवासिनीं स्वप्रकाश रूपिणीं स्वप्रकाश रूपिणीं स्वप्रकाश रूपिणीं वन्देऽहं शारदां विशारदां ज्ञानदां वरदां वन्देऽहं शारदां परा अपरा विद्याभूषिणीं परा अपरा विद्याभूषिणीं सुरवर सुजना सेवितां सुरवर सुजना सेवितां शुभदां सुलभां सुस्वर वाद्यनिरतां वन्देऽहं शारदां विशारदां ज्ञानदां वरदां वन्देऽहं शारदां वन्देऽहं शारदां वन्देऽहं शारदाम् नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं चैव ततो जयम् उदीरयेत् परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्मसंस्थापनार्थाय सम्भवामि युगे युगे धर्मसंस्थापनार्थाय सम्भवामि युगे युगे सम्भवामि युगे युगे सम्भवामि युगे युगे.
Dear Professor Gopi Jandarang, President of the Academy and Chairperson of this session, esteemed Dr. L.M. Singhviji, famed scholar diplomat, respected Professor Kapil Kapoor, distinguished scholar, eminent scholars, fellow writers, and dear friends. I am pleased to welcome you to this Sahitya Academy Golden Jubilee Seminar on the Mahabharata text context readings. Some of you may recall that the Academy had organized a seminar on the Mahabharata 17 years ago in February 1987. We believe that another seminar on this great Indian epic is fully justified, as the Mahabharata scholarship has grown deeper over the last 2 decades. New researchers have made new discoveries possible. New reading methodologies have yielded positive results, and a lot of contemporary literary texts of diverse genres have made their appearance in most of the Indian languages, looking at the whole text or its episodes in radically new perspectives. We will be looking at some of these texts in the course of this seminar to assess the impact of the epic on the modern democratic Indian psyche expressed in Indian languages. Mahabharata is completely and unequivocally a classic, so much so that it can be said to be the classic of Indian literature. Italo Calvino, the great Italian theorist and fiction writer, defines a classic as a book that can be read and reread at all the stages of one's life, every reading revealing newer and newer levels of meaning and planes of appreciation. Classics exert a peculiar influence on their readers when they refuse to be eradicated from the mind, as also when they hibernate in memory, camouflaging themselves as the collective or individual unconscious. Every revisit to these books is like a new encounter, since we who read them have changed and the historical perspective has also altered. Thus, all rereadings of the classics become as much voyages of discovery as the first reading. A classic is a book that has never finished saying what it has to say. This is one of the sources of its eternal fascination. Classics come down to us bearing the traces of prior readings and bringing in their wake the traces they themselves have left on the culture or cultures they have passed through. The reading of a classic always gives us a surprise or two vis-a-vis the notion that we had of it before reading. It's a total book equivalent to a universe. The reader can never become indifferent to a classic. One can only love or quarrel with its contents. It helps you define yourself in some form of relationship with the book and the author. One has to know from where one is reading the classics to relate them to one's own space and time so that one is not lost in a timeless world. Its eternal fascination comes precisely from its being contemporary at all times. It is the continuous alternation between the text and the world, the past and the present, that gives the readings of the classics their real value, even when this can be a very disturbing experience. While Indian literature has produced several classics, Mahabharata is assuredly one to which all disqualifications apply without exception. Mahabharata has been read from a large range of diverse points of view. It has been seen as a profound and genuine tragedy, as it ultimately points to the absurdity of war and the disappearance of Dharma from the world. This high tragedy has the strange power to exalt and not depress, as Edith Hamilton puts it while speaking of Aeschylus. It is to many, like Dr. Iravati Kave or Kuttikrishna Marar, a record of complex humanity and a mirror to all the faces we ourselves wear. It refuses to idealize its characters, as Ramayana sometimes seems to try to do. There are neither flawless heroes here nor perfect villains. Like the noble figures in Greek epics and tragedies, or in Shakespeare's chronicle plays, the characters here exhibit a wide range of human feelings and passions: love, devotion, bravery, chivalry, and also hatred, envy, rage, violence, deceit, cowardice, unchivalry, injustice, and censurable conduct, even by the prevailing standards. No character is beyond interrogation here. Contradictions haunt their conduct. Each one is also justified if seen from his or her point of view. Even Duryodhana's resentment was not without a cause, as he had been humiliated by the Pandavas. Iravati Karve, in her famous study of Mahabharata Yugant, shows how no great personage in the epic was devoid of human failings. In a sense, I'm sorry, I'm not reading the whole speech which has been given to you. Iravati Karve, in her famous study of Mahabharata Yugant, shows how no great personage in the epic was devoid of human failings. In a sense, this is what makes them close to us, our own images or our human contemporaries, with their specific mixture of strengths and weaknesses. The human appeal of this text, its ability to adapt itself to the everyday context of our life and to address us directly and intimately, is an important part of its aesthetic appeal. Mahabharata, while being one of the finest products of India's folk tradition, is also the confluence of several literary and philosophical streams, as is reflected in its very construction through the ages. First as Jaya, a celebration of Pandava's victory in maybe 8,800 verses, then as Bharata, the Vaishampayana version of about 24,000 verses, occasioned by Janamejaya's Sarpasatra, and the present around 1 lakh verses as enlarged by the traditional Southi Ugrasravas at the request of Shaunaka during his 12-year-long sacrificial session, Dwadasha Varshika Satra, in the Naimisharanya. While the nucleus of the poem remains, as in Iliad, the tragedy of a futile and terrible war of annihilation waged between Kauravas and Pandavas, it grew into a virtual encyclopedia of Indian, at least Hindu, culture by absorbing into its structure various religious discourses, historical events, and folk tales, and stories of Purus, Kurus, and Nagas, turning Krishna into a god, supplementing the description of the battle with Bhagavad Gita, and as traced by D.D. Kosambi, Brahminizing it through successive phases. Professor R.N. Dandekar is right when he states in an essay on Mahabharata that it is not the Vedic Aryan element that influences the Indian way of life and thought today, as the Vedic gods, sacrifices, and moral codes have almost entirely vanished from the contemporary life of the Hindu, while it is the popular epics that still hold sway over Indian life, thought, ethics, and imagination. And of the epics, it is Mahabharata that, cutting across castes and classes, regions and categories, still entertain, inspire, influence, and guide the people of India. There is hardly any department of Indian life, public or private, which is not effectively influenced by the great epic, as there is hardly any significant writer who, directly or indirectly, has not felt the impact of this complex human record. Its size, that is 8 times Homer's Iliad and Odyssey put together, its epistemological range that proves the truth of the saying Vyasochistam Jagat Sarvam, its documentation of history, its marvelous insights into the lives of men and women of diverse strata of society, all these made it enormous and weighty at the same time, as indicated by the lines in the epic itself. Mahatvat Bharavatvacha Mahabharata Muchyate. Dandekar replaces the word Bharavatva with Bharatatva to bring out the Indianness of the epic. The sanctity and the authority that it gained over time also gave it the status of a fifth Veda, Bharatam Panchamo Veda. Oldenburg, the German Indologist, was right when he proclaimed that in the Mahabharata breathed the united soul of India and the individual souls of her people. While being the national saga of India, it is also universal in its emotional and intellectual appeal. The claim that what is not found here is impossible to find anywhere else is not much of an exaggeration, as the epic constitutes an outstanding record of the collective conscious, subconscious, and unconscious of men. Rationalists have questioned the actuality of the Kurukshetra war, pointing to the impossibility of a battle of such dimensions at that point of time. What they miss is the fact that it is not history, but an epic where events have been raised to the level of myth, magnifying them with hyperboles, miracles, mystification, symbolization, idealization, and universalization. It is improper to correlate the imaginative descriptions in the poem with archaeological findings. The epic is also important for its efficacious propagation of the new dharma of Krishna, characterized by its bold emphasis on loka samgraha, or the solidarity of the society in the place of Brahmaigatra Jnana, or the meditative realization of one's identity with the highest reality. Karma Yoga, or renunciation in action, in the place of sannyasa, or renunciation of action. Bhakti in place of ritualism, and philosophical and religious synthesis in the place of dogmatism and sectarianism. It may sound paradoxical that this dharma is secular in its essence. It does not negate artha, material property, and kama, the pleasures of life. Instead, it accepts and even promotes them. In short, it's a practical philosophy of this world for every man, and not a metaphysics for the chosen few who are ready to renounce the world. The knowledge given is not static. It is no dead weight that is imposed on us. It inspires movement. It leaves us to our own action and invites us to shape our lives in the way we want it. Despite the dogged attempts of Western savants like Oldenburg, Frasbopp, Christian Lassen, Ludwig, Adolf Horstmann, etc., to demonstrate that Mahabharata was an unintelligible conglomerate of disjointed pieces, the epic has always enjoyed in Indian antiquity the highest reputation. It has been used from Bana's time as a book of education. It has continuously inspired Indian poets, playwrights, and fiction writers as a quarry of plots and ideas. It has fascinated Indian philosophers, saints, and rulers like Shankara, Kumarila, Jnaneshwar, Ramdas, Akbar, and Shivaji. And it penetrated also into Burma, Siam, Java, and Bali. Sculptors, painters, singers, and actors have drawn great stimulus from it. And even today, writers from radical feminists to existential modernists, from Dalit revolutionaries to postmodernist experimenters, go back again and again to its events, characters, situations, and ideals to demonstrate their creative vision of men and society. We have clearly not outlived this mighty book, and this seminar is another evidence to its eternal intellectual fascination. While welcoming all of you to 3 days of stimulating discussion and greeting the distinguished guests, the scholars, especially L.M. Singhvi and Professor Vidyanivas Mishra, who unfortunately could not be here, but who has sent his address, which will be read by another equally great scholar, Professor Kapil Kapoor. I welcome Professor Kapil Kapoor too, and Professor Gopichand Narang, our president. The hope we cherish is one of original discoveries and innovative analysis of the text in its historical, moral, and intellectual context, and its diverse readings by contemporary writers of repute. Welcome to all of you, and thank you. Let me now request Professor Gopichand Narang, President of the Sahitya Academy, to deliver the presidential address.
माननीय सिंघवी साहब, प्रोफेसर कपिल कपूर साहब, प्रोफेसर सचिदानंदन, the distinguished scholars, the distinguished writers, all of you who are present in this auditorium, मित्रों, मेरा यह सौभाग्य है कि मैं आप सबका दिल की गहराई से स्वागत करूं। आपको जानकारी है कि साहित्य अकेडमी के स्वर्ण जयंती प्रोग्रामों की ये महाभारत सेमिनार उस श्रृंखला की पहली कड़ी है। मैं बहुत ही शुक्रगुजार हूँ सिंघवी साहब का, उन्होंने वक्त निकाला और तकलीफ़ की यहाँ आने की। विद्यानिवास मिश्र जी नहीं आ सके, उनका जो की नोट एड्रेस है प्रोफेसर कपिल कपूर साहब पेश करेंगे। जो कुछ मैं कहने जा रहा हूँ बिल्कुल आम सी सामने की बातें होंगी। My brief remarks are of general nature, and by way of my tribute to the formidable Mahabharata scholarship, both conventional and unconventional. Friends, Mahabharata, a marvel of Indian creativity, is like an ocean. It contains multitudes. No single work represents the Indian genius in such a comprehensive manner as does Mahabharata. Through centuries, it has permeated the Indian psyche to such an extent that it has become part of the cumulative unconscious of the Indian people. As said by Sri Aurobindo, and I quote, "The Mahabharata is the creation and expression of a collective national mind. It's the poem of a people about themselves. It is futile, therefore, to apply it those rules of poetic art which we are accustomed to apply to epics of limited purpose and scope." End quote. In no other culture has a non-scriptural text been so deeply imbricated in the life of the people as Mahabharata has been in Indian life and thought since ancient times. In the knowledge-centered oral Indian culture, like other intellectual texts, Mahabharata has played multiple societal roles as source of knowledge and values, as sustainer of the social fiber, as inspiration in adversity, as entertainer and educator in happy times, and as proto-explanatory model for any number of problems encountered by the society. The special relationship that obtains in an oral culture between texts, particularly kavyas, and the people has made it possible for the Mahabharata to be so complexly related to the Indian society. Unlike in the literate traditions, reading function is only one of the many functions, and a minor one, if one may say so. In the oral culture, which receives, disseminates the text in various modes of rendition: singing, recitation, enunciation, enactment, all modes in which there is mass participation and which transform the text into a public transaction as against something that is accessible only to those who can read. the text becomes a public property. And that's exactly what the Mahabharata is. Such is the reach of its narrative and its numerous sub-narratives. It's generally known that it is larger and richer than the mythologies of Greece and Rome, being 8 times larger than Iliad and Odyssey combined. Mahabharata is available in 3 recensions, Pune, Kumbhakonam, and Nilakantaki, with in all 1,217 shlokas arranged in 18 books, parvas. By far the longest poem ever written, excluding the supplementary Harivamsha Purana, is magnanimous in its size and reflects in its span the grandeur of the civilization that produced it. Called by various names, Prabandha Kavya, structured composition; Itihasa, record of what all happened; Purakalpa, Itihas, a narrative with several protagonists; Panchama Veda, the 5th Veda; Dharma Shastra, sociological treatise. Though not a sacred text, is nevertheless a patronymic text in India's intellectual tradition, very much like the Bible in the West. Apart from the Indian language's literary traditions that have borrowed characters and events extensively from Mahabharata's narrative, in all realms of thought, the epic has been mined for examples, analogies, subjects, themes, and models. Primarily, it has related to Indian life and people as a mine of knowledge, the Mansa Gangotri. It is declared in the text itself that the sage Vyas, with his deep learning, has expounded, quote, righteousness, material goals of life, desires that the human beings have, the Shastras that help fulfillment of the threefold paths of knowledge, action, and devotion, the science of medicine, the science of weaponry, architecture, the science of music, and such other worldly sciences, has unfolded the secrets of Shruti texts. It has expounded the meanings of Upanishads, end quote. And then it is declared completeness is the marker, lakshana, of this composition. As such, there is hardly a subject under the sun which is not covered in here. In the characteristic legendary mode, it is said that when this narrative text, with its stories from Puranas and of what actually transpired, was weighed against the Vedas, it outweighed the Vedas. There has been much discussion regarding the placing of the epic in history and related issues, such as the date of composition and the several stages of the growth of the text. Some scholars maintain that Mahabharata is purely mythical Others argue that it is didactic, while Niharanjan Ray sees it as, I quote, a historical fact being mythicized and myth itself becoming part of history, end quote. Later studies have shown that Mahabharata prolongs the Vedic heritage by correlating the epic story and its leading characters with para-Vedic and Indo-European themes. Most stimulating, however, is Dandekar's view that the common Hindu culture is more a construct of the popular epics than the Vedic Aryan element. May I have some water? Sorry. Dandekar is of the opinion, and I quote, if there is any one single work which has proved to be of the greatest significance in the making of the life and thought of the Indian people, and whose tradition continues to live even to this day and influence the various aspects of Indian life, it is Mahabharata. Dandekar argues that the principal gods of the Vedic pantheon, such as Indra and Varuna, are no longer worshipped. Their place has long since been taken over by the gods of the people, like Krishna, Vishnu, and Shiva, Rudra. He has also raised the question of the exact relationship between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. He maintains the Kaurus have been fully prominent in the history of ancient India, whereas the Pandavas appear on the scene almost abruptly. In the course of the traditionally accepted threefold growth of the epic, the bardic historical poem Jai was adapted in favor of the Pandavas later as efficacious popular vehicle for the propagation of the new dharma of Krishna, with the Bhagavad Gita as the focal point. The new dharma of Krishna was characterized, among other things, by its bold emphasis on karma yoga, or renunciation in action in place of sannyasa, or renunciation of action. Furthermore, bhakti in place of early ritualism and religious synthesis in place of sectarianism. Sri Krishna's character also ushered in a new ethical code by laying stress on the importance of attaining the end which one considers to be right by any means, even if those means sometimes do not appear to be right. As is evinced by the unchivalrous manner in which Bhisham, Drona, Karna, and Duryodhana are shown to have been overcome, and this not only with the connivance of Krishna, but also under his active direction. Dandekar maintains that, paradoxical as it may sound, this dharma is essentially secular in character. Not only it does not reject artha, material prosperity, and kama, pleasures of life, but it actually promotes them. Professor Vidyanavas Mishra, however, is of the view that the highest truth of the Mahabharata is the ever-flowing stream of life, which never dies. It is of the nature of Rit, the dynamic order, which is eternally moving. For Mahabharata, events per se have not been significant. What the events signify is significant. There is no dichotomy between truth and untruth, as there is none between dharma and adharma. Because there is no absolute dharma, right, or adharma, wrong. Only the absence of Rit, the cosmic order, is juxtaposed against truth. The change in shadow is nothing, after all, but a change in light. Friends, I skip some parts of this paper and I come to the last 2 pages. Mahabharata is a patronymic text, as I mentioned earlier, in the sense that it has been mined by literatures of all Indian languages for themes, characters, and episodes. There's a long and rich tradition of retelling of the narratives from Mahabharata in the Indian languages and dialects till today. Shivaji Savant's Mrityunjay in Marathi and Pratibha Rai's Yajyaseni in Odia are among the celebrated fictions of contemporary Indian literature. Not only the just Indian tales, it is said that just as the body cannot be without food, there is no tale in this world that does not have its seed in the Mahabharata. And all great poets, Sreshta Kavi, and I quote, resort to this narrative, Katha, and shall keep on resorting to it. End quote. Thus, elevated Mahabharata story, full of great meaning, is a living text, as it is great meaning concerns the fundamental human condition, the fundamental varieties, the questions of what is good life and how to attain it. Through the seesaw of the battle, the 4 ends of life are foregrounded and defined in the actions, principles, and destiny of a cavalcade of characters. Bhishma, Duryodhana, Karna, Yudhishthira, Vidur, Drupadi, Kunti, Dhritarashtra, Abhimanyu, Subhadra, Dronacharya, Ashvathama, Kripacharya, and hundreds of others. Shakespeare, Dickens, and Homer are known to have peopled the world of their works. With all of them, people are known to have peopled the world of their works, but all of them put together in the sheer range and diversity of characters must yield place to Vyasa. What is the significance of Mahabharata today for the Indian people? If we study the discourse of average Indian life, it's replete with images, themes, references, symbols of Mahabharata. They permeate all domains of life: politics, films, science, technology, art, literature. Each and every character from Bhishma to Shakuni of Mahabharata has a symbolic, metaphoric value. A partisan king is Dhritarashtra. A biased teacher is Dronacharya. A devoted student is Eklavya. A bitter brother is Karna. A person to given his weakness is Yudhishthira. Krishna is a multifarious symbol, one who resorts ardor and equipoise, one who is a true lover, a devoted friend, a loyal brother, and above all, a defender of dharma, dharma within quotes. But I must now stop here. Friends, I thank all of you for making this international seminar on Mahabharata possible. As has been mentioned, this is the second seminar on Mahabharata being organized by Sahitya Academy. The earlier one was in 1987, and the proceedings of which are available entitled The Mahabharata Revisited. I am once again truly grateful to Pandit Vidyanavas Misra, who is not present here because of indisposition, and respected Shri L.M. Singhvi, who both are authorities on Indian thought and tradition. I'm sure their profound and erudite presentations and the papers that will be read in the following 3 days will add to the significance of this seminar. Thank you very much.
Let me request Sri L.M. Singhvi, diplomat and scholar, to deliver the inaugural address.
My esteemed friend, Professor Gopichand Narang, the indefatigable Secretary of Sahitya Academy, Dr. Sachidanandan, Professor Kapil Kapoor, and in absentia, my friend Dr. Vidyanavas Misra, Professor Indranath Chaudhary, whom I had the privilege of acquiring both for my Nehru Center in London and for IGNCA, and who was involved in the organization of the seminar 17 years ago. Distinguished scholars,